Good morning, everyone. Today is perfect. Today is Wednesday, December 13th. This is the C4 Metro Subcommittee. Greetings to my co-chair, Commissioner Savas. Always nice to see you bright and early in the morning. We have lots of wonderful things on our agenda today, so we're going to be seeing many of our staff present to us, which I always appreciate. So any comments for the good of the order before we jump right in? Very good. All right. Well, we will start with an RTP process and updates from Karen Burig.
And I'm not seeing Karen. Excuse me, Karen is right here. I just moved her over to a panelist. Here she's popping on. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning. And I am hoping that you could also bring over Jamie Lorenzini because, as is usual, the TPAC items blend into the JPAC items, and she has equally as much information as I have. That would be helpful. We'll just kind of talk about both. So good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone on this December morning. And I think that perhaps all of you may know now that we officially have an adopted 2023 RTP, which is extremely exciting because one of the key elements of being able to have an adopted RTP is the federal funds continue to flow and we get to continue to have investment in our transportation system. So, but with that, I'm going to touch briefly on the JPACT agenda because the JPACT agenda, for the most part, is discussion and information items. But then we'll go into just kind of a conversation about the 2023 RTP and what's next, because the other lovely thing about the regional transportation plan is that it kind of never stops. we wrap up on one, and we still have some items we'll be working on, and then we jump deeply into the kind of the next round of regional transportation plan. So we'll talk a little bit about our understanding of what's next. And then I guess finally, it really is about everyone here sharing their experiences of going through kind of this RTP process and their thoughts. So overall on the JPACT agenda, I think one thing I wanted to highlight is as a part of the consent agenda item, there is the approval of adding 15 new projects to the MTIP. And those are a reflection of all of the wonderful work being done throughout the region to be able to get additional funding to be invested in the Portland metropolitan region. And with that, additional projects are being added to the MTIP. So that's really kind of a high level why there's so many changes. There are some cancellations of ODOT projects due to the way that they're either consolidating them or their project descriptions have changed. They kind of bring them together. So that's under the consent agenda item. And then there'll be 4 information items. And there'll be an update on the Safe Streets for All work that's being done throughout the region. There is going to be our very own Jamie Stastny providing a presentation of the Sunrise Corridor Visioning Project. And then there'll also be an update of the regional freight delay project that has been underway at Metro. And then finally, there's going to be a discussion of the JPACT work program. So those are the overview of what's going to happen at JPACT. And so as a part of TPAC, we had a series of presentations as well, but we did get a preview of what it's going to look like over the next few years and work that kind of came out of the 2023 RTP and moving forward into the next few years. So one of the things that I think hopefully might be easier for you to follow than just listening to me, I have one slide I want to show from our that was at TPAC, and I think it's a helpful graphic across the what's going to happen across the next few years. And so I'm going to just share that. And hopefully is that Can folks see that graphic? Is that big enough? Okay, great. So this truly is the list. You can see across the bottom of the screen are years. So we just have moved from the 2023 RTP plan decision here in 2023. We're right here at the end of 2023, and we will jump in next year to a series of projects that came out of the work that was just done. And then you can see, so that work is going to be completed between 2024 and 2025. And I'll talk a little bit about the different items. But you can then see right there at the middle of 2025, which isn't too far away now, scoping for the 2028 RTP is done. And then just as we have wrapped up, doing an RTP, a regional transportation plan, takes a good solid 2 years. So that's kind of what the anticipation is that they'll be starting the next RTP process in earnest in early 2026. So let me talk a little bit about what's going to happen starting next year. And there really are a couple of different colors here. The blue color has a lot to do more with project work. The very top item, and this is an item that perhaps we'll want to have on a future agenda item for C4 or C4 Metro, and that's work on the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA Regional Climate Action Plan. So that's a project that Metro is helping to facilitate. It's actually broader than just the 3-county region. It covers a 7-county jurisdiction. And the work that they're doing really is foundational and allows all of our jurisdictions to apply for different funding opportunities over the next year and even into the future. So the blue items that are listed here have come out of work being done in the 2023 RTP. And as I noted, there'll be an update of the Safe Streets for All grant work that has been done, as well as other work tomorrow at JPACT. A particular element that is specifically related to the 2023 RTP is the Regional Transportation Functional Plan update and the regional mobility policy. Those are really the action items. These are that's the sort of the direction to the jurisdictions on how they can and how they comply. Yeah, how they comply with the RTP. So that's a really important element for the technicians to be able to make sure everybody's sort of brought together and their individual plans really align with the RTP. There's a lot of other interesting studies that will be going on, and I know that we'll be very interested in the first and last mile accessibility through transit studies. So that will be looking closely at how one element is how shuttles function throughout the region. There'll be additional work on a freight access study. We'll be talking about workforce diversification, another kind of the phase 2 of the emergency transportation routes. There's going to be work on investment area planning, and what that often is corridor work. I know that Commissioner Shull has been very much involved in the 82nd Avenue Transit study. So that's a lot like investment areas. And there'll be work on the regional travel option strategy. So there's a lot of work, and it's all going to start next year. Let's see, I do want to highlight that here down in the orange there's going to be work, coming out of the 2023 RTP, which sets the policy. We then work on both the 2027 Metropolitan Improvement Program, the MTIP update, and that sets direction on how we spend the money that comes in, the federal money that comes into the region, as well as the regional flexible funds allocation. So those two items really are about what kind of projects we will actually construct in the near term and providing guidance and actually processes for being able to incorporate those projects into the overall RTP. And then you can see down here at the bottom, all of this is within the framework of the regional transportation funding conversations that will be going on over the next few years. So I think that is kind of how I will kind of leave my overview. I don't know. I'm going to give a moment or two for Jamie, if you want to jump in and provide any more of your insight as to the conversations around kind of the outcomes of the 2023 RTP.
Yeah, okay.
Stop sharing.
Thank you, Karen.
Mhm.
Just a few quick notes. On the screen Karen was showing, there were a lot of projects, and I anticipate there will be some additional conversation about the timing and sequencing of work. Also, during the RTP process, Mayor Buck, who I don't see in the room today, raised interest in splitting the RMPP between the constrained and unconstrained project lists, which would have effectively required ODOT to complete an RTP amendment to advance the project into construction. Although there was insufficient support at JPAC to advance this amendment, there was interest in an elevated MTIP process for toll projects. The question came up at TPAC, and it sounds like Metro still needs to have some internal conversations, but we hope to hear more in the coming months about what an elevated MTIP process for toll projects could include. Are there any questions?
I have a question going back to that slide you had up, Karen. But Jamie, was your question to what you just stated or to the overall agenda item here? I don't want to interrupt anyone who's got a question to what you just spoke to, Jamie.
It's to the overall conversation around the RTP and our takeaways.
Okay. So I'll just wait because mine is back to the slide.
All right. Well, I think the floor can be yours.
Okay. Karen, I have a question, two, one related to the EPA on that slide you showed, one relates to the EPA piece, and then I want to just talk about the MTIP and the RFFA matter as well, or piece. You mentioned the 7 counties, and I gather that might have a better grasp of the commute shed as it stands today, because we have people that are moving farther out because housing is more affordable outside the Tri-County region. We all know that. And people are commuting in to go to work every day in the Portland area. So is how much emphasis does that have upon the MPO?
So I would say that there is the way that the approach is being done, because see if I can say this right, the 7 county region really has to do with the air quality region. Okay. And they have been brought together because there needed to be kind of a point jurisdiction to lead this process, and Metro stepped up to be able to do that. But the work that's being done is kind of in some ways equally being done throughout the region at this point. And so I do think that being able to have the staff associated with this project come early next year, and I think we've talked about this just at the staff level, to be able to talk about what this project entails, because there's a series of steps that really is around funding for various federal, or access to various federal funding that has inspired this project, and the way that that federal funding really has directed the actions that need to happen.
Okay, and I hope this is educational for all of us. I'm always learning, so I don't pretend to know everything, but I can tell you that from speaking to people, especially when I go to NACO conferences, National Association of Counties, I talk to people that are part of other MPOs, and how we operate here is quite unique than others. And I'm just no reflection on my friends at Metro. So this is not a Christine, no hit here, but it is an overall paradigm that I think I've talked about before. So it is no surprise. My concern, I think the EPA approach is a wise one, right? I mean, the 7 counties, it is about air quality, which is why MPOs were formed in the first place. So therefore, you know, this basic question of how do we spread the funds across the commute shed in a way that works and accomplishes the overarching goals and purpose of what the EPA and air quality is all about. And that's where it gets lost. It sometimes seems to be more about jurisdictions wanting the funds, which are always limited. So there's a fight for the funds, and those with more political clout seem to get the funds. In the meanwhile, we're not accomplishing really the air quality principles of the commute shed, whether it's in the Metro Region 3 county area or neighboring counties and so forth. So I just see a breakdown in how we effectively accomplish that. And I think that's what we're all wrangling with. Lots said there. I'll just park that there. And I want to shift over back to funding, to the MTIP RFFA, which is at least some means of federal funds being rolled out into this greater effort, right? Whether it is politically driven or whether it is really truly regionally distributed in a way that where's the biggest bang for the buck for air quality purposes, right? And that's a big thing to open up. I'm not going to go deep into how much we invest or don't invest in transit from a 3 county, 5 county, or 7 county approach, but obviously it's broken, in my opinion. But back to the MTIP and the RFFA, do we foresee how big those funding buckets are? Are they getting smaller? You know, we've had experiences where the MTIP bucket was much larger than it is today or in past. So what do we foresee as far as the size of those buckets for MTIP and RFFA?
So as a part of the conversations that we've had to date, they haven't talked about that. It's one of the first kind of pieces as we start those processes are to do the funding forecasts. So that really kind of falls within the whole kind of MTIP policy, or even the regional flexible funds is kind of a sub element of the overall MTIP policy documents. So I would imagine in the upcoming year that those conversations will begin. And that's my understanding. I guess I'm going to punt it over to Jamie to see if you've heard anything different.
Yeah, I can give a quick comment on the EPA grant and the MTIP side of things. So on the EPA side of things, Commissioner, it may be helpful to know that in addition to the metro statistical area, that 7 county area, the state of Oregon, state of Washington, and the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians have also received planning grants. And at this stage, they're just planning grants. Implementation grants will come in the spring. And I anticipate that the implementation grants will be a subsection of what comes out of our preliminary regional climate action plan. And that climate action plan is being driven by a group of jurisdictions. And I think the cities of Lake Oswego, Milwaukee, and Clackamas County are all participants on that group. Jumping to the MTIP side, I don't know what the RFFA forecast is, but I know that I think we can influence the MTIP by applying for and receiving grants. One thing that JPAC will be doing this Thursday is programming grant dollars that were awarded through the Oregon Community Paths program. Happy Valley is one of those recipients, even though prior to the 2023 RTP, we applied for a project that wasn't in the 2018 RTP, got it in a grant cycle. The project is now added to the 2023 RTP, and ODOT is running point on amending the MTIP. So while we don't know what's happening with REFA, we could conceivably grow the MTIP by competing for more dollars.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I think you kind of got most of my questions there. I appreciate that, but I'm just really trying to bring us all to this place where, and you kind of you'll help me set the table here for, you know, the RUFA and the MTIP process, whereby, and we've heard this, some of you have been here a long time, I've heard this before, and I know Karen and Jamie have been here for a long time. But as we know, we have experienced in these cycles where the criteria changes, and we are either going to be included or excluded by virtue of how the criteria is crafted. And so it's a moving target, right? And we don't know what it is until it is. And as how that's crafted, do we have any more influence than we have in past cycles to do that in a way that is favorable to meet the actual overarching goal of what the regional air climate is, whether it's 3 county, 5 county, 7 county, or is it more going to be more driven by political influence?
So I would say, as a part of the final discussions about the 2023 RTP update, kind of those Chapter 8 action items, were a series of elements that basically said, hey, we need to look back. We need to, both at the TPAC level as well as the elected level, look back on how these processes, what we learned, and then be able to have the conversations about how we can better do regional flexible funds and the MTIP as those processes move forward. So I would say that, one, there will be staff engagement on the development of the RFFA process, the regional flexible funds process. That's the specific federal money that goes specifically to funding projects for local jurisdictions where there's an application process and whatnot. So staff is involved both in developing the specifics around the criteria that will be used. And all of this is under the umbrella of the policies of the regional transportation plan. So criteria are developed, and then projects are submitted. I think we all sort of remember this process we went through. Projects are submitted and then analyzed and selected, right? So I would say both at the staff level, and there'll be conversations at JPAC about these processes as they're approved. So getting to your question, Commissioner Samas, is that I do think there are going to be opportunities for engagement on those topics, both at the staff and elected levels.
Yeah, I know I've taken up a lot of space here, so I apologize for that, but I just wanted to just kind of close with maybe one thought about this. I really, with my 25 years of watching this all take place, I really am trying to be constructively critical as to the paradigm or the structure that we have, and it's just not working. I'm going to give you an example, and this is what I'm going to close with. I support, really, and I don't want this to be misinterpreted. I do support and recognize who relies upon transit more than anyone, and that's people of low income, right? And I understand that the ridership, whether it's here or it's in other metropolitan regions, that they rely on that critically. So I don't support any rolling back or not being attentive to that particular need. But what's happening here is that, as we know, you've heard me in many forums talk about how do we get a regionally balanced transportation system, or get Metro, or get JPAC, or get the region to acknowledge that for the sake of air quality, climate. So, but what happens is, and Dwight, Karen, for example, are very attuned to this. We've seen what's taking place with the STIF dollars. And it's really driven by where are the lowest income people. And I think that's a huge need. I don't want to dismiss that at all, as opposed to where is the biggest bang for the buck from an air quality standpoint, right? So it seems to me that instead of air quality being the driver, other things are becoming the driver. And we've got this unbalanced regional transportation system, which is continuing to become more imbalanced. A lot said, but I just want to bring your attention to that. So and I don't want to take C4 or C4 Metro off track. I really don't. But I think maybe we ought to at some point, whether it's a retreat next year or sooner, at least identify what we want to strive for some of those greater needs, whether it's air quality or the MPO or a paradigm shift or whatnot. But I just don't see how we're going to change things going forward. And I think we're going to become farther and farther apart. To have 140 some odd units being built out in Happy Valley, and we're trying to get transit out there, or even when the governor was here last week, transit was part of our conversation. We just don't have an equal distribution and access to that, and the funds to do it, and the state constitution, that's a barrier. And so, lots said. I'll stop there. Sorry for hogging all the space.
Paul, as co-chair, you get to take up as much space as you'd like, so that is completely okay. Jamie, did you have a comment?
Oh, yeah, I just dropped it in the chat. As an important reminder, ahead of each REFA cycle, the Regional Flexible Fund allocation, Metro does lead a discussion that helps set priorities and policy for that funding cycle. If we'd like to change the way the criteria is structured to better meet the intended outcomes, it could be meaningful, and there could be an opportunity for this group to maybe coordinate around a unified message or asks around how we'd like the criteria to be modified to better meet the outcomes we'd like to see.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments on this topic before we transition to, I think we've got MPAC next on our list of updates?
I guess the one last thing I'll say is there's going to be a lot continuing to go on, and it's going to be important for all the jurisdictions to continue to participate in these processes. While we've wrapped up the 2023 RTP, it's now about how we actually implement how those policies are implemented. So that's what I'll leave you all with.
Very good. Good comment. I mean, it's a never-ending cycle. We're all there at the table as often as we can be. So, nope, very helpful. All right, transitioning to our MPAC updates. Commissioner Shull, is this in your wheelhouse today?
Yes, this month C4 went before MPAC. MPAC scheduled for this evening at 5 p.m. So I can tell you, though, we got a couple of interesting things we're going to look at. We're going to get a briefing from Metro on the update on buildable land inventory. In particular, what they're going to talk to us about is the review on a preliminary look on buildable land inventories in our cities and the 3 counties. That should be very interesting. And then they'll talk about what the next step of the 2024 urban growth management decision process will be. And then we will hear this evening from Erica Palmer from the city of Sherwood on Sherwood's ambitious Sherwood West concept plan. And again, that's going to be very interesting. I understand that that plan has no impact on the Clackamas County boundary, but we will take a special interest in the potential impact on that big development on transportation inside Clackamas County. So at your next C4, I'll be able to tell you more about it, but that's what we have for tonight.
Very
Thanks.
good. That actually a question I have. So a plan like that isn't the land that Sherwood has identified it. That's in the reserves, right? So that's not actually part of the UGB at this juncture. And
That's
so
that's what I understand, but
okay.
We'll see more about. I think
So,
yeah, we'll see more about that tonight. But I think you're
good.
right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm always just kind of curious, so it's a huge plan. I mean, going through the Pleasant Valley North Carver comp plan on the east side of town here, knowing how big a plan like that would be, how financially huge and complicated, and having that land as part of the UGB obviously would be a very important part of that process. So I'm
Yeah,
kinda
but
curious.
Councilor Sherman, I can tell you, tonight, listening to this plan, I'm just gonna be wishing and hoping and praying that someday Clackamas County can get something like that. We need it so badly. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions or comments from the group? All right, we're gonna jump right into, let's see, next up is our special subcommittee on transportation planning. The next one is tomorrow in Wilsonville. A number of us have attended the prior meetings, and I thought, the conversations have been interesting. I think this is where, from a strategic perspective, as we kind of talk through this, I don't know who's got this, is just all of us talking through it, but one of the things I found really, well, intriguing, and I guess part of this, I usually lean on Commissioner Savas for a lot of information because he's kind of quite often has his finger on the pulse of a lot of these activities. But I had noticed even going at the last one that I attended, which was over at the PCC campus on 82nd, they they have their kind of broader comment time for special and invited guests, of which only 2 showed up. And they were only, and it seemed like maybe they had guests that were electeds and other individuals that were kind of part of the community, but they just couldn't make it. But it seemed like it was only kind of the street trust kind of people, and I don't remember which specific groups they were, but they get a much bigger and essentially unlimited amount of time that they can speak, and the rest of us were limited to 2 minutes. And I'm kind of curious how that happens ultimately, or if that's just we have no control over who gets invited, and they just kind of pick and choose who that is that's going to speak. But I guess maybe just a general comment on how those meetings went. One takeaway I had that I thought was really interesting is that whether it be street friendly people, car friendly people, car not friendly people, one of the consistent messages across the board is a robust revenue sharing package is imperative and has to be put in place. That was a message that came through loud and clear from the non-car folks as well as the car folks. And I hope that message is getting through pretty consistently. And I think maybe one of the takeaways as well is as you get a very diverse grouping of messages, how do we make sure that, with only a 2-minute window, you don't get to cover a lot of topics. So how do we get that specific talking point that we want to have as the committee's takeaway, and we pound that message every time so that they hear it over and over and over again? Because I did feel that while there were a lot of good messages that were shared, there was a lot of noise in the conversation as well. And when I'm watching individuals on the dais watching their heads nod, I'm trying to determine what their takeaways are, and quite often their takeaways are not the takeaways that are in line with what the ball we're trying to move on this side. So nor are the takeaways factually based. But that I think I've said enough. Commissioner Savas, do you have some comments?
Yeah,
Oh.
I do. So, I sat in the room. There is value to watching the tape. So if any of you want to watch those through OLS, you can watch those. But being in the room before and after gives you another real life experience in the conversations. But I was struck actually Monday afternoon when I heard one of the co-chairs give his input of what he had heard at both of these, because he was at both of these. And I was taken aback by how, whether there was themes that, I think we all sometimes all hear what we want to hear. Maybe we're all guilty of that, I'm sure. But I think there were some things that stuck out to me in the very first meeting in Central City, Portland. There were 4 elected officials that came up, and I think the theme I heard from them was the issues of diversion and then the impacts in their communities, and their concern about that, and also the call for revenue sharing. Those are the themes I took away from the electeds. However, there was a substantial showing of people that were, seemed to me singing the message of, no new lanes, and they were anti-Rose Quarter. And that was not what the hearing was about, really, but that was what they brought. You know, that was a message that's hard not to take away from. And some of those folks, not very many of them, but some of them showed up in force at the second one, in which Councilor Sherman was there and Mayor Milch and some of you others were there. And the theme was a little bit different there, because then there were some local business owners and constituents that were talking about the diversion and the spillage off of I-205 in Multnomah County into their business community, which is real. I mean, that's very understandable. And so it was more, impactful. They weren't organized voices, right? They were just people, constituents that were paying attention, that seemed to be coming forward. Mayor Milch, I think, did really well. Councilor Sherman did really well. We were not invited guests, by the way. Invited guests, we learned, were going to get 4 minutes, and those who were not invited were going to get 2 minutes. But when we got there, I know that Mayor Rory and Councilor Baumgardner from West Lynn and others had heard from, oh, if you speak now, you disqualify yourself from speaking again. So I was considering speaking at the second one based on what I heard at the first one. But after we heard that we'd be disqualified, perhaps, we all sat back, and I decided we'll just sit there and listen. And I will be there tomorrow night in Wilsonville to hear what they have to say there. And there are invited guests, there are electeds, but there was no elected officials that showed up at the second one, to what Councilor Sherman had pointed out. So in closing, what I think stuck out to me more than anything is that there is, and I don't know what the motivation is. If the motivation is purely political, and it's against the Rose Quarter and anti-lanes for the Rose Quarter, or it's political and it's anti-lanes towards the IBR, whatever that may be, there is this, I'm gonna call it for what it is. It's not technically supported with science or facts. There's this belief that by having congestion and congestion pricing, and the impacts of congestion pricing spilling over, that's going to help the climate. I'm telling you, the math and the science does not say that at all. Matter of fact, it flips the other way. I can prove, at least with my background, and I can actually do, if you give me a whiteboard, I can draw it on and you're going to see two ways to calculate it, and they both say the same thing. It's false. So as Councilor Sherman said, when he saw those heads nodding, I got nervous, because people are, it's a fallacy that just completely eliminating any capacity building is somehow going to be good for the climate. It's not. Or capacity building is going to be good for public safety on the streets. It's not. We've got a lot of statistics that show just the opposite. So that's what concerned me. We'll look, and I'll listen to what we hear in Wilsonville, and see what happens from there. But Trent might have some information as well to add to this. But I did hear that the reason they're looking where we would be technically disqualified, so to speak, is that it's one legislative record for all of the hearings. So therefore, I'm going to make sure I get 4 minutes, not 2 minutes. But that does not discount anyone. Let's say that I believe Mayor Fitzgerald, for example, is invited to be an invited guest. She'll get her 4 minutes. But does that not preclude any other city councilor from Wilsonville to come in and speaking on the 2 minute thing? So you're all welcome to come and speak. If you're not likely to be the invited guest, and of course we have one more after Thursday night, so it'll be pretty clear. But I said a lot. Trent, you want to add anything?
Thank you, Commissioner and Councilor Sherman. Those are some solid observations about what's already happened from those December 2 meetings. There's a lot to unpack with what y'all just shared. And so I will see if I can kind of close the gap there and talk a little bit about some of the questions you asked. The overall theme that I heard, staff heard from the county, and some of our colleagues had heard, is that a lot of people who testified said something to the theme of good idea, bad execution. Tolling is good idea, but it's being poorly executed right now. And there's a problem with that. And so a lot of frustration about the implementation of the work. I heard a lot of people up north, I say up north, in the Portland region say, if you do this, there will be diversion into local roads. We need more transit, where there's already a lot of transit. And it's not lost on me that for this group and this community here that we're talking with, if there's diversion and that group already has a lot of transit and they need more transit, how much more transit do you need where there is less, right, transit? And so if that's going to be true, if the intent of tolling is to push people into alternative modes, I'm excited to see Tom here respond to that one. But I mean, I just mean it generally, right? That's been a theme of this group, right? So if they have a lot of transit, they need more. You have less transit, you need some and more as well. So I think there's a compelling case for y'all to make that discussion. But going back to what Councilor Sherman said in terms of like being consistent, having those same themes, making sure everybody hears the same thing. Good idea, bad execution, if that's what you believe, I think would be a consistent theme that those legislators are going to be hearing in that special subcommittee on transportation planning. I want to speak to the meeting tomorrow at Wilsonville, as well as the Gladstone meeting. One question that you asked, Councilor Sherman, is what planning or coordination work is going into that? I would say a ton of planning and coordination is going into that. We're working with Jamie Stasny and others to make sure that we are letting everybody know who would be affected by within our communities to show up. And that's really what I would say to do is go show up. Not enough people showed up at those Portland meetings. And I've heard from my counterparts up north that unless you are following the topic and unless you're following that subcommittee, you probably didn't know about that meeting, right? There wasn't a lot of advertisement. I'm not seeing a lot of advertisement for it down here, external from that subcommittee, external from our own process here. It just means a lot more to y'all than it has to them up there. There was really late notice on where the meeting would be, and so just the advertising for the opportunity there was really poor. And Clackamas County is pushing that out to the public here. We have social media work on that. We're working with the mayors on the I-5 corridor. We had a meeting with them yesterday to talk about like how to sort of organize some of the conversations so that it's, to your point, Councilor Sherman. So you're saying you're taking bits and pieces to make sure that you cover a little bit of everything, but still that some of those themes are there. And we've talked about that. Y'all have talked about that at the end of November at your toll strategy subcommittee, what those big themes are. Alternative modes and transit improvements is a big one. Safety, diversion, all those big elements that you've always been talking about are those big themes there. And what I would encourage y'all to, if y'all do have a chance to testify, what I would encourage y'all to focus on is leaving that subcommittee with a lingering question that they need to go back and answer. What is ODOT's plan for ... Pick it. What is ODOT's plan for addressing the safety issues on Stafford Road if everyone's going to get off of I-5 at Wilsonville and get back on I-205 near Stafford? Like, what is ODOT's plan to improving this country road, essentially this not urbanized road where there's a lot of safety issues already? And if the intent is to put more traffic there, what is ODOT's plan for improving that before you implement tolling so that there is not more increased safety risk? Ask questions in that way so that those committee members can come back after these community meetings and say, what I heard was a lot of questions about what is ODOT's plan to implement this in a way that's going to be good for our community. And then it's becoming to that group, the subcommittee, to say, if ODOT can't answer this, then what is our recommendation? If they can't answer it, then what is our recommendation? So put that subcommittee in a place where they have work to do to try and go get details from ODOT, because they are legislators. They will be able to ask ODOT questions, hard questions that they should be able to answer. Their task is to come up with a recommendation by the end of February or early March, the end of the short session, as it relates to tolling. And so if it's just, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that, what I'm worried is that you won't leave them with the appropriate work to go and do and make a good recommendation. Still say the concerns, but leave them with work to do that compels them to have to go and talk to ODOT to get details. Because where we have struggled with ODOT as a group is we've asked a lot of questions and they've come back with answers that are sometimes incomplete, many times incomplete, and has left us with more questions. And that's why we asked for the pause, or that's why the governor instituted a pause. There was back to those comments in Portland, good idea, bad execution. We were really struggling with the execution. We were really struggling with the program as it was presented. As details came out, there were just more questions and then more questions about those questions. And so use this pause, take advantage of this pause, take advantage of the creation of this committee. I mentioned to the mayors yesterday, it's a good idea to remind that committee why they're meeting. They are meeting because there were too many questions. The governor needed to pause it, and this committee was put in place to take a deep dive into the process of the tolling project as it's being created. So if that's true, what are they trying to discern? So leave them with questions would be my recommendation. And you can't show up enough. Even if you don't plan to testify, fill that room, because I literally heard one of the co-chairs of that subcommittee say yesterday that they didn't really see that there was a big concern about tolling from those Portland subcommittees. Not enough people turned out. There must not be a big deal up there in Portland. So if you disagree with that, it seems to me like showing up and turning out is just as important as getting your 2 minutes. So even if you don't get your 2 minutes, just being there, I think, will be a really big deal. And back to the question, how are they choosing these invited guest speakers? I'll just say Representative Hartman has been doing yeoman's work on making sure that there are expectations for the subcommittee and who speaks within the Clackamas communities. We provided some recommendations to her about within each corridor, at least for the Wilsonville area and the I-205 area within Clackamas County. We recommended a few ideas that it seemed has trickled up. So she has been making her voice known within that subcommittee's leadership about who and where and who needs to speak and where these meetings need to be and so on. So she's been doing a lot of that work. She's taking feedback from and advice from the mayors, other folks who have her cell phones. She's taking advice from the county. We're working closely with her. So she's been a great partner in this. Those are all my comments based on some of your questions and others. I see those hands up. They've been up. They're more important than me. So why don't y'all start talking?
No, very good. Very helpful information, Trent. Tom, you want to weigh in?
Thank you. Trent mentioned that there's a lot of transit in North Portland. There's also a lot of people in North Portland. There are a lot of riders. There's going to be a lot of diversion. There's going to be a lot of diversion from 205. And I think we all agree on that. And the mitigation is called out to be transit. So it needs to be paid for. And I did testify before the committee, so last Saturday. And the message that I wanted to deliver, I hope it got conveyed clearly, was ODOT is required to pay for this, and they still haven't come up with the mechanism to do so. It's their project. The congestion is going to be probably significant on your side streets and in Portland side streets. So we need to make sure there is mitigation and serious mitigation. I said in my testimony, if you throw a lot of buses in a big traffic jam, that's not going to do anything. You need to be able to move people faster through the region and give some priority to transit. Otherwise, the tolling is just going to create a big nightmare. So there has to be a significant, real solution. And if transit's the solution, they need to make it work. And I think that was a testimony. Commissioner Savas was there listening to me. I hope that's what he got out of that. Thanks. And now I got to go to a TriMet board meeting. So season's greetings, everybody.
Very good. Thank you for the comments. Appreciate that. Mayor Milch.
Hi, I went to the sessions at Southeast Portland on 82nd, and I appreciated the comments from the people who live very close to that neighborhood. You know, they waited for a long time for Portland to get jurisdiction over 82nd Avenue, and they're hopeful for improvements there in its safety and ease of use of transit. And the thought that all of a sudden people from the freeway are going to come over and get on that street just as they're trying to improve, and I think is a real concern. So I prepared 4 minutes of remarks, not knowing just what that procedure was for how they select invited guests. I thought because of the promises from the very start that elected officials would have an opportunity to testify, that I could ask if I got there early if I would be an invited guest. And that's where I was told, no, if you do it here, we won't invite you to be a speaker at the one that's really focused on the region where you live. So I limited myself to a 2-minute comment like everyone else, and tried to cut my 4-minute comments down to 2 minutes. Wasn't quite successful, but I tried to make some points about local diversion impacting our urban community of Gladstone. And I want to say how much I appreciate the work that staff did in preparing this list of topics for conversations at these upcoming meetings that's in our agenda today, because I think if we make the effort to sort of split up some of those topics and not talk over and over about diversion, but some like people also talking about additional funding options, or talking about the importance of this is where we can make comments in terms of the advantage of widening lanes in areas to reduce bottlenecks, because that presumably will have a positive impact on the need for people to divert into communities. So I like the strategizing element of this. The same we did with the value statement earlier, focusing on specific issues and kind of dividing them up so that each one gets some attention, rather than everybody doing their own thing and maybe not focusing on, something getting left out. So it's a good plan.
Very good. Good comments. Councillor Barry.
Thank you. So I'd just like to echo everything that everybody's said, and then briefly add that Wilsonville has a unique concern, in addition to the diversion and safety and costs and air pollution or climate control, is in that we have a large community that's south of the Willamette River called Charbonneau. A lot of seniors live there, and that in order for them to get to Wilsonville to do their shopping and their medical appointments and whatnot, they have to cross the bridge, and we need to make sure that we have transportation connection in between North Wilsonville and South Wilsonville. So that's one of our big concerns. And then, of course, we're excited about the meeting that's coming up, and I hope that you will all attend so that the room is filled.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
I can keep talking about this, of course. I just wanted to add a point that I have neglected to share so far, which is that while the Wilsonville meeting is scheduled, the Oregon City Westland meeting has not yet been scheduled. And so attend both of them. It's really a point I want to clarify. Right now, it appears that the Oregon City Westland meeting is potentially going to be on January 6th. And so get a pencil, not a pen or a Sharpie, and circle that date so that it's at least on your calendar as an FYI. And once we know for sure that that's the firm date, we'll share that with basically everybody here that we know needs to be at that meeting, as well as and then y'all should share it out to people who should also attend and make that room very full. The Legislative Planning Office, LRPO, they are really trying to make sure that they have a big enough room for that meeting, and so they recognize that will already be a very large turnout.
Very good, thank you. I will echo that comment. The notion that the turnout wasn't great in Portland at the 82nd Avenue meeting. I've gone to many meetings over the years, and I found it next to impossible to find the information about where the meeting was going to be held and even when I got there and had to figure out which building it was, and the small 8.5 by 11 sign that someone had just taped up on the wall of the bus shelter was the only thing off of 82nd, off of the cross street in the entire parking lot to help me get to where I needed to go. And we do this stuff. I mean, the general public who would probably never even know this meeting is going to occur, let alone actually be able to find their way there. And in a situation that can be very intimidating for the general public to come speak to a committee like that. So even the notion that there wasn't that much interest is a pretty flawed conclusion to draw from that information. But okay. Other questions or comments before we transition from this one? I think we're doing well time-wise. So anybody else want to jump in? Trent, more to tell us? I know you're top of the list for the next conversation as well. So I'll just let you take over and move right to the next one.
So moving into the legislative session, more becomes known as we get closer to it. But I would say since our last updates, it's more of the same. We just have more details about some of the same pieces. So one thing to really note here is that Measure 110 will be a major priority for the state legislature. And so for those of you who have strong feelings or strong requests in the direction of curbing Measure 110, that there will be opportunities aplenty in February to make your voice known. I think a leading theme that is coming out of the city of Portland, as well as with public use and public spaces, is trying to curb public use of drugs. So that will be a major request in the 24 session. Some of that's coming out of that downtown Portland group that was trying to have bring people back to downtown. For whatever reason, the name of that group has left me, but that is a big deal for TriMet, for downtown Portland, for others, not mainly focused on making sure that public spaces are and feel safe to be for the general public. And a lot of the drug use has sort of curbed that feeling. And so public use is going to have some sort of look here in 2024. No one's seen the bill yet. We've seen the concepts be presented, but we haven't seen the draft language yet. So more to come as that all comes out. On Monday, some of y'all attended this Oregon Business Plan Leadership Summit, where it's usually a chance for legislative leadership and the governor to start announcing some of the things that they are anticipating for the upcoming legislative session. The governor was consistent there by continuing to reiterate her goals on housing inventory being top of the list for her moving forward. There's 30-something thousand units a year that she wants to target for building. And it is important for her to have money, infrastructure money, to keep that moving. And so she said this number. I wrote it down. It feels really big. I'm curious to see if it's true. She said $500 million for housing inventory and housing infrastructure. So when you hear infrastructure, I want you to hear water. I want you to hear roads. I want you to hear planning. I want you to hear a few things, not just roads. And we also know that $500 million is a big number in our hearts, but it's not a big number when it comes to an infrastructure project. For example, the third lane of I-205 is just under that number. So you can build 6 miles or 12 miles of lane, or you might be able to build an additional 20,000 units with supporting infrastructure. So I don't know what the exact target is of this number is. It was just interesting to me that she announced the number on Monday. So let's be aware of that. Obviously, we have some of the state's fastest growing cities here in Clackamas County, cities that are growing quickly. Please think about that number getting ready for February, and what infrastructure plans or programs do you need to maybe potentially capture some of that here in February or March, and how can Clackamas County support you in that? If that number is real and y'all are building quickly, help us help you. So I just want to say that here as a way, put it in your brain. I want y'all to think about it and let us know how we can be helpful. Another big thing that's been announced is that ODOT will be getting a lot of money for maintenance of Eastern Oregon winterization projects. So like clearing the roads and et cetera. They're also getting $20 million to clean up downtown Portland. So that's part of that downtown effort for specifically the ODOT right-of-way roads there. I only say that number specifically because it's very clear where ODOT is continuing their message of needing more operation funds, and to the extent of the state legislature being requested to come in with this emergency funding. So they're up to $39 million so far here for the upcoming session, just on being able to do the operations that are what most people feel are expected that they would do. So they're struggling. That message is consistent. We're going to keep hearing that. And that sort of segues into this effort for 2025. I think that, we just talked about the subcommittee on transportation planning, but really a lot of the work, a lot of the focus and attention right now by state legislators is getting ready for a transportation package in 2025. And so what's Representative McLean and Senator Gorsuch, who are the co-chairs of Joint Transportation Committee, what they are saying to folks, they said it on Monday at a huddle, they've said it on last week at the Oregon Transportation Forum. They are about to release a framework that will outline sort of their strategy for getting towards 2025. And there will be included in that what the goals are, what the targets are, and how to engage in the process. There will be, according to them, like little subcommittees that focus on like specific topic areas such as safety or infrastructure, specifically to, projects. They have also been very clear about what their priorities are. And a common phrase that is being shared right now is getting back to basics with this transportation plan. And what I would encourage y'all to think about with that phrase is transportation funding in general, not projects, but how to fund the transportation system moving forward. And so more of the same on this. You've heard all this before. The gas tax is going away. Gas tax is going away. The gas tax is going away. The gas tax is going away. And so with that being true in the future, then what? Is it going to be some congregation of funding types that everyone can sort of get to or agree to in 2025 that sort of sets the tone for how transportation will be funded for state and local moving forward? And it's going to be really important for each of y'all to keep banging the drum for local funding needs, because right now, a lot of the language is really around state funding problems, not local funding problems. But y'all all know that we're tied to the hip. We're connected at the hip on how things are funded, at least with the gas tax. And when the gas tax goes away, that affects counties and locals as much, if not more, than it's going to affect the state. And so the solutions need to be joint solutions, system-wide solutions. All of our counterparts in the other counties and the other cities are sharing that same message. When y'all have a chance to talk with your legislators, please do share that same message, that is a priority, that you can't just solve ODOT's problem in Salem. You have to solve everybody's problem if you're going to solve this back to basics question. So that's a big deal. Senator McClain is really committed. She has been saying to completing incomplete projects. So I want you to hear Rose Quarter. I want you to hear the I-205 project in full. She phrases it like this: the I-205 corridor plus the bridge. So when she's talking about completing the bridge that's under construction, but also that 6 mile corridor. And that project is still a priority for the Truckers Association as well, which has been said recently at the OTF meeting. So there's still a lot of support for the bottleneck improvement along 205, but it needs to be paid for with something. And that's still the lingering question. And I want that to be very clear. That project will not come for free. And that has been a message that has been reiterated to me multiple times in the last couple of weeks, that there has to be a dollar put in that direction. It won't be from existing funds. That's not the best message to receive. I'm sure that everyone has questions about ODOT's budget, and it's a big budget, and there are reasons to feel like that's a legitimate question. I'm not questioning that. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. So focus on the projects, focus on the basics, safety and environmental protections. So those are, I would say, the big four that I'm hearing them talk about so far when it comes to transportation. And we're going to see more of that when this framework is published, probably in early January. So be on the lookout in early January for this framework to kind of hit the streets, as it were. And I think it will be really important to continue, again, banging the drum on the local need that these ideas have to be system wide. The last thing to really say here about the state legislature is Clackamas County wants to finish its funding request for the county courthouse. That project is on time, on budget, to deliver more courtrooms and therefore more access to justice for the residents of Clackamas County, and that serves all of our cities. So it's a project that doesn't feel as wonderful as a lot of other projects feel, but it's a really good project. It's looking really cool. The crane is up there. They just put the roof on earlier this week. Can't wait to maybe even host a C4 meeting in there in the future, so y'all can get to see what it looks like, what it feels like, and just a really big change. Oregon City's been a pretty good partner in this, and so they're not here today, but it really takes a village to build this building. And so, they're right there, Mike. Hey, hi there. It's really taken a village to build this, and that includes the state legislature. We need a final little funding request from them that's been in the works, and so hopefully we can achieve that here in 24.
Very good. Paul, jump on in.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something I said before, but you never know who's all in the room. But I want to add emphasis on this. Trent touched on it a little bit, but we heard it Monday stronger than ever. But I'm going to digress and talk about how this all came about. So about a year ago, I and others worked together to get the Association of Oregon Counties and the League of Oregon Cities to get together to put a joint conversation about transportation funding in light of a couple things that were happening. Number one, discussion about transportation funding for projects. And also the biggest one is that the jeopardy in which our 50-30-20 split that we rely on, 20% for the cities and 30% for the counties, could potentially be in jeopardy. So there have been 2 of those meetings. Another one's coming up in January. Monday, at a meeting that Trent and I and others were at, both AOC staff and LOC staff were in the room as well. But the theme across the floor in the greater group was discussion now of potentially ODOT wanting to tweak the 50-30-20 split. And I think comments along the lines of, oh, geez, I didn't know that Oregon was the only place in the country that has a 50-30-20 split. But all structures are all different. State funding for transportation in different states is unique in funding. So you just can't go in and say, oh, we're going to do what this state did when they have a sales tax or they have other means to fund transportation. We have nothing. So if they take away that 20% split for cities, guess what you got? A lot of you who don't have a gas tax have nothing. So I implore you, I want to encourage you all to work, and I'm talking to my friends here from the cities, to get involved at LOC at these meetings and start raising this, because if we don't get in front of this now, this is a statewide issue, and we need to put some emphasis on that. I guarantee you, I'll do my best at the AOC side to circulate this, and the buzz is already out there. But please pay attention to this. We need to be a powerful voice and lobby for the legislative session, because as Trent kind of alluded to, the focus seems to be all about ODOT, and ODOT's winning that message on their plight. But as I've told everyone all along, we're in this together. So when they suffer, we suffer. And I can tell you, Multnomah County is making a pretty good case how they're suffering from this. And it's more about the inflation than it is about the curve of or the graph on what our revenues are for gas tax. It's not as though it's actually plummeting. It's actually that our dollar is not going as far as it once did. So I don't dispute at all the graph that shows what the funding stream is forecasted to be in years out for gas tax revenues. I don't dispute that, but I'm hopeful that the inflation pressures ease a little bit, and that graph, as far as how far our dollar, I hope that one's wrong and that comes back up and we get more bang for our dollars. But that's not for us to decide. That's for us to experience. So, and to plan for. A lot said, but I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Very good. Good comments. And as a layperson, I kind of look at this and say, why don't we explore a natural inflation plus indexed gas tax that will increase as gas utilization goes down, to at least buffer the negative impact of this revenue reduction over time, and to at least smooth that curve out. That to me seems, especially in an environment where gas prices have come down exponentially from their high. And I saw $2.20 a gallon in Austin, Texas this week. They're very, very low. Yeah, and artificially low relative to the rest of the world as well. So we are cheap here. Gas is a subsidized industry in this country by a wide margin. One question I have, I'm going to jump away from transportation just for a sec. Trent, question for you. So you had mentioned that the governor is talking about creation of 20,000 housing units going forward. Are those 20,000 subsidized housing units or just 20,000 housing units in general?
If I said 20, I thought I said 30 plus, but maybe it's 20.
Apologies.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the actual number, but it's really high every year for multiple years. And so I don't think she cares. And she was kind of asked that question, on Monday by an interviewer, what's the specific plan for your housing work here? And she said, really anything goes, any type of unit, anytime, all things are on the table was sort of the truncated version of her answer. We know in Clackamas County, we've heard from our housing team that housing exists on a spectrum, right? So she wants to push a bunch of infrastructure funds because developers want to find more affordable ways to build more units. And that's on the homeowner and home renter, single family, up to, multifamily type of housing. But I think she's equally invested in ensuring that there is more middle income and lower middle and missing middle sort of housing as well. She's also trying to push additional shelter funding as well. So I feel like the housing or the governor's office has really thought about housing in the same way that Clackamas County does, which is across the spectrum, where you really have a no wrong door, no pun intended, approach to attacking the housing problem, where it's such a deficit presently in Oregon that anything goes will help any part of the continuum, will help the broader picture in any way. So more single family in Happy Valley is just as good as like 4-story multifamily in Lake Oswego or Milwaukee or Malala, right?
Well, except for the CFEC rulemaking, but other than that, so, and the reason I asked that question, again, my view is obviously skewed being in Happy Valley, where we have thousands of available lots that are being built as quickly as the developers can build them. They can't get labor to do it. They can't get materials to do it. Interest rates are too high for them to pencil out the profit that they need to make this work. So it has nothing to do with the state making this, other than obviously infrastructure is important and we need to be really focused on that. But I'm always concerned, and I will put this out to the group because again, I have a biased view in my little town. The developers are profitable, as incredibly profitable as they want to be. And every rule that we seem to be putting in place at the state level is, how can we make it more profitable for the developers to build more product in our region? Am I missing something? If we are truly, in a free market society, if we give opportunities to developers, they will not pass through that reduction in cost to the end user because it's free market. They will charge exactly what they can charge. So in my mind, the only way, if we were going to legitimately try to create product without taking that internally and the state actually creating the product, if we were going to do that, we would be incredibly heavy-handed and we would say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Developer, you have to build a certain number of units at this price point, or you can't build anymore. That's the only way we can get this thing to happen. So what am I missing, Trent? Please educate.
Trent is not a developer. I have a really good friend who does do development, and he does things in downtown Portland. And even he says it is becoming more expensive to do the front cost, that you're not making enough profit near the end because there's not enough, the margin is tight. And so I actually had a very similar conversation with him on Monday night because I was similarly confused by some of the same math. The market price still is the market price after the thing is built. But if it's becoming more expensive to build, then the margin gets slimmer and slimmer. So I guess my actual answer here, the one I would want you to take home and not the one that I said just a minute ago, is just like everything else, including the transportation and tolling topics, there's nuance to where that is. But if you can incentivize developers who are the ones doing most of the building at usually the most affordable way, they're the ones building the most housing. They're building more housing than the public is, right? If they can build more in whatever way that they can build more, the more inventory there is. And the more inventory there is, just like in Texas and other places, the less pressure is put on the end user, us, the buyer, or the renter, to go and rent that thing. So
sure. No,
there's nuance is my answer.
Obviously, it's a partnership. It is complicated. There are nuances to all of the conversations, and I try to make it as more simplistic than it really is. It's obviously incredibly complicated. Paul, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, one thing on this comment. I was at a NACO conference, and I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember what the economist was, but I went into a session and listened to a nationally known economist who really looks at things at a very high level, big picture. And he made this observation. It was basically about infrastructure. And it was when Trump first came in and there was talk of a big infrastructure package. And he gave us a warning. And the warning was, if there is an abundance of money, an infusion of cash from whatever it may be mindful that there's only so much material, asphalt, rock, gravel, aggregate, steel, workers, that you're going to tax that. And as a result, the demand will be so high that the price will go up and those dollars will not go as far. And he applied the same thing towards infrastructure for housing. and he said the same thing. And the demand side on that was how immigration or control of the border or population growth as a result of that. So one thing we need to be mindful of is that I know I think we're thinking in a vacuum, that we're trying to cope with the housing crisis as it sits today. But what's dynamic about this is that the population is growing artificially as immigration increases. So if 100,000 people become citizens of the United States due to immigration, that's a demand. You can take the 2.1 number and divide into that. That's 50,000 more homes you need just for that. But that 100,000 estimate that's an underestimate. I don't know what the number is today, but it's a frightening number. It's daunting. Just think about the demand for housing and the materials out there. Just getting back to the material and the labor side, there's not enough people to do the work. There's not enough material. And by the way, there's not enough money. That's a daunting task, but we need to be mindful of that. Just wanted to share that.
I appreciate that. And I think that, realistically, if we are truly going to address this as a society, my wife and I live in a 3,000 square foot house with 3 extra bedrooms. There are so many people that live in houses with capacity that could be used to house individuals, but that's not a path we're obviously going to go down. So I think it is definitely an interesting concept, and certainly a very difficult one to navigate. And the part that I always, as a finance guy, the supply and demand side of that, I'm always concerned that if we are actively building in an effort to bring down pricing to make things more affordable, that brings down everyone's home's value. And home ownership, equity in your home, is the largest retirement asset that the vast majority of Americans have. So if your $500,000 house, your house with $500,000 of equity, if we were able to bring down pricing by 30%, which still wouldn't make it affordable, but your $500,000 house is now worth $350,000. Do we all get reelected in that environment? Are we cool with that? So the math on both sides doesn't work, and obviously there's no good answer. Okay, we've got one last topic, our year in review and member updates. Anybody, Trent, do you have any comments on this one before I turn it out to the group? Who would like to reflect back on a year of RTP and transportation issues and MTIP and RIFA and all the fun stuff we dealt with for the past this year? I was looking back over my notes in this year of C4 Metro Subcommittee meetings, and I think we had the same 3 topics at almost every single meeting across the board. So, but they were robust topics. Commissioner Savas, please.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe I can, if Commissioner Mitchell might want to jump in on this. We've had this discussion at the executive committee to some degree. We've had it at the retreat. Staff have had this discussion, and that is, our future agenda of C4 as it relates to housing, which has never really been part of our structure, right? It's been about MPAC, JPAC topics. And I know the housing is rolling into both of those, but the supportive housing services discussion is something that was not anticipated either. So as I've talked to some of you privately who I've either reached out to or you've reached out to me, I just want to make sure, knowing that there's more membership, voting membership especially, I want to make that clear, of C4. It's majority ran by you all, members of cities who have the greatest influence in our future. Is that something that we all want to talk about? Because I hearing concerns that while everyone seems to want to talk about it, no one or very few cities are maybe participating, and some cities are taking a larger brunt of that. And so I don't want to see all of you, that being the cities, and an issue where it becomes either contentious, but I'm looking from the positive side. Is that something that we really want to tackle here at C4? And if so, how would we alter our structure to make it more, I won't say routine, but more productive? Commissioner Mitchell, do you have any comments on that?
Well, that's there's a lot there in that question. I guess first impressions kind of, it appears that vast majority of the time we're talking about transportation, and not, as you said, talking about housing and some of those other impacts. So, and I honestly, I've struggled, and I have talked to more than one person trying to figure out exactly what C4 Metro in particular is all about. Why are we doing this? Because I don't see us having, this group in particular, I don't see having any impact on where we're headed, whether it's housing or transportation or whatever. And certainly it's been good for me to sit through these meetings and get the perspective. But in terms of, am I making a difference, or is this group making a difference? I don't think so. So I don't know if that gets to your question, really, Commissioner, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, Commissioner, I just want to just say that originally we were founded on, before we were called C4 Metro Subcommittee, we were called the Pre-Impact, Pre-JPAC. And the idea was we would get together, coordinate in advance of the meeting. So we would have a unified voice, county, cities, special districts at MPAC and also at JPAC. So that was our purpose. And the unique thing I just want to just say is that there's the housing bond from Metro, that the dollars be spent within the Metro boundaries. There's the supportive housing services that pass, that those dollars have to be spread. So the rural cities feel like they're less of the conversation as a result of that than they are at the C4 table. But here it's more central because we are in, this group represents that in a way, not by design. And by design, if we could tweak that design, but there are cities that have stepped up on the housing side. Happy Valley's building a lot. Milwaukee's part of a huge expansion of our facility at the hillside area near the hospital off of 32nd Avenue. So there is, Wilsonville, a lot of you have a lot of development going in there where it's, housing or, more high density housing. Not all of it's low income, clearly, a lot of it's market rate. But I just wanted to put that out there, Commissioner. And I see Councilor Stavenhort is got her hand up. So, Councilor.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just comment on this. As you had mentioned, Milwaukee is trying to lean into the space of housing, not in terms of just density, but affordability as well. And as a, fairly landlocked, jurisdiction, we're particularly interested in anti-displacement strategies for our residents. So folks that are living in Milwaukee now, how do we maintain the affordability, the filtration of housing stock, other amenities, including infrastructure. And I really appreciate the conversation earlier about infrastructure improvements. So Trent, I will be reaching out to you. So what I've done, from our side is tried to be involved in various different groups. Of course, we have the UGB boundary discussion happening, regionally. There's the Housing Advisory Board through the Housing Authority with Clackamas County. There's the Homeless Services Network, the steering committee there. With regard to the SHS funding, we've got a few key investments going in Milwaukee that will be open countywide. And so as we're thinking about things like, how we develop these resources and assets on behalf of the whole county in our jurisdiction, we are reaching out to Clackamas County to have more of a coordinated conversation, but I personally would really welcome and value some of that conversation happening within C4. And I don't know if that's part of the regular meetings or if it's a specific subcommittee, but I want to say that I would be happy to be involved in that and bring, learnings from all of these different stakeholder groups that I sit on. I think there does need to be a coordinated response, and there is a benefit of having the C4 conversation so that we can all be on the same page around our values and our strategies in these areas, because otherwise we end up developing, housing at a pace or a type that benefits just our jurisdiction and doesn't necessarily plan for future growth and collaboration between cities that are our neighbors. So I want to leave that there, and I'm definitely interested in being involved in more of that conversation.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. Trent, real quick.
Yes, I guess I would just say this group is what you make it. And so there are no other coordinating committees like this in Clackamas County, right? There's nothing else that we really convene at the county level where you have the opportunity to coordinate on a variety of topics. But what C4 as a group has really sort of honed in on is transportation and land use. And I think it's fair to say that housing lives in between both of those things in many ways. My feeling about C4 has been, especially here at the C4 Metro Subcommittee as a pre-impact, pre-JPAC meeting, is that a lot of it has been respectfully reactive to, what's been going on at those particular meetings, because they drive the planning process for a lot of things. And then each of our individual jurisdictions sort of try to figure out what is our role in some of those things. And there's planning that happens in each of our agencies as well. But the value of a coordinating committee, if y'all want to be more proactive on some of these things, is to try to think about and maybe even stage conversations where y'all are setting your own targets as Clackamas County, as a group, not county, but county, right? As a group, to be within the metro area, to have new transit goals, new service goals, new development goals. The housing, the governor, I said it earlier, the governor wants to build this many more housing units for this many over so many more years. What's Clackamas County as a group? What's our role in that? What's our target number? And what do we need to do as a group to hit that number? Do we have enough shelter capacity in Clackamas County, or will it all be in Oregon City forever and forever? Sorry, Oregon City. That's where a lot of it is right now, right? And then over in the Sunrise area for just a little bit more, can that be expanded? Does it make sense to have a broader sweep of that? As a group, as 12, major cities, there's some smaller ones in there that get us close to 15, 16, but really it's 12 active big cities that do things. Do y'all have collective targets to participate in the region? Because by doing that, what you're going to be able to do is be proactive. You're going to be in front of some of those metro efforts to expand the UGB. You're going to be able to participate in these governor inventory goals. You have opportunities to create something here if y'all want to go that direction. And Brian and me and some of the folks over in transportation, the housing offices, we can help with that.
Okay, well, we'll keep this conversation going, and put your thinking caps on. I want to wish you all the best and safest of holidays. Councilor Sherman, you want to close us out?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Savas. It has been a pleasure. We had a very productive 2023. It is always good to see you all. I've enjoyed getting to know all of you better through these meetings and occasional personal things in person as well. So with that, I will echo Commissioner Savas's words. Please have a happy and healthy holiday season, a prosperous 2024, and we will see you all again very soon.
See you next year.
Bye-bye.